Hi and welcome to the first edition of AXOR Futures. I'm Anke Sohn, Head of Global Brand Marketing at AXOR. When we talk about space today, what probably first comes to all of our minds are the personal spaces we find ourselves in every morning. So our bedrooms, bathrooms or kitchens. These spaces make us feel comfortable because they're intimate or for social interaction. And this is exactly our field of expertise at AXOR. When we conceive products and come up with new concepts, we always define a vision for the entire room. And space is precious. Hence the title for today's session. It's also why we invited speakers from very different areas of expertise to share their thoughts on what we call at AXOR compact luxury. Because luxury is no longer just a question of size. Of course, we think in large dimensions, but real luxury also can be, let's say, a simple wooden table with a sea view or a single rosebud. A gold ring is special because it stands for something unique. We feel the same way about many everyday items. Most of them are small, yet significant at the same time. Even our homes can be pretty small these days, and yet we love them. So ask yourself, what does luxury mean today? Obviously, our perception and idea of luxury has changed. Many would say that the real luxury nowadays is actually time. Time for ourselves, to do whatever we want or to spend with our families and friends. Some of the most important things in life are intangible and small in size. Let me introduce today's speaker, distinguished experts in their fields. Cédric Waldburger is a startup investor and a cosmopolitan. He is also very passionate about reducing the list of items he owns. His complete list of possession consists of only 64 items. British designer Jay Osgerby is co-founder of the design studio Barbara Osgerby, based in London. The studio has also successfully launched a multitude of cleverly designed objects over the last 2 decades. And what's special about this design studio is they have a special approach to innovation, materiality, color and interaction with users. Chris Sanderson, co-founder of the Future Laboratory, specializes in trend forecasting. And today he will share his insights on the future of urban living with us. Hi Chris, good to see you.
And you, Anke, very nice to see you too.
Well, we have you here as an expert on the future of urban living, and I would very much like to deep dive directly into the topic of today's session, which is precious space. So could you explain that or give us a brief statement from your perspective on how the concept of luxury actually is changing?
Oh, I think luxury is at a really interesting juncture right now because I really do believe it's changing, and it's changing in some quite fundamental ways. Because mainly it's the fact that it's really no longer so much about product, and it really is more about place. It's more about the experience. And I think here in this decade that we're now in, that we've called the transformative 20s, our concerns as individuals, as humans, are so much more existential. You know, we're really increasingly concerned about water, about heat, about energy, about light, and about space. And we're concerned about those things from the idea of both how much we use and consume those resources, but also increasingly how much we're going to share them. And, you know, luxury traditionally always meant about superfluity. It was about having more of everything. But as we move into a situation where more and more of us are living in more densely populated, what we're calling megacities, I think it's really crucial to rethink this notion of luxury. You know, we're moving into a time where 68% of the world's population, this is according to the UN, are going to be living in urban areas by 2050. And this is really going to mean that our architects and our designers are going to have to be concerned with this issue of space for decades to come. And if you then throw in the way that we're now wanting to work more flexibly, to work from home, to live from home, to maybe move from city to the countryside, all of these, I think, are changing the way that we view the spaces that we have around us. But I think essentially for me, this is about the fact that we are wanting to imbue our homes with a greater sense of meaning. They're becoming places of rest, of respite, of relaxation. They're a sanctuary, they're for wellness, they're about comfort, and they're about renewal. And I think we're going to be investing so much more of our focus and our energy in the details and the simpler things of life. And we're going to be looking for refinement and sophistication out of the essential and the everyday. You know, luxury used to mean waste and excess, but now increasingly it means fewer but better.
So if we say the new luxury is actually no longer about buying a lot of things and big dimensions and possessions, and we're moving towards more having possibilities and experiences. So what do you think, what does this mean in general for high-end products?
Well, I think we're having to begin to rethink our relationship with product and the idea that businesses and brands are simply engaged on a more product cycle. And instead we start to really redefine our relationship with product, and we invest in product that is about quality, that often is designed that is not designed for obsolescence. It's designed to last. And it's designed, I think, also with some sustainability imperatives in mind, that it's designed to actually encourage us to use less often, maybe less water, less energy, that maybe there are less moving parts. So it's easier to manufacture. And I think all of these start to become some of the key bywords and the watchwords that we see many designers want to incorporate in this idea of new luxury products that really come from this benchmark of understanding the role that they can play in a sustainable future, in creating legacy products that are designed to last a lifetime.
Perhaps picking up again the title of today's session, which is Precious Space, how do you see the notion of that in our context?
Well, it's, that notion of precious space, or the term that we used for the report, compact luxury, I think starts to uncover and reveal all sorts of influences around this idea of the continued urbanization of our living spaces and the lasting impact on the way that we think about our living spaces, but in the city of the future. And the report that we delivered really focused on three key areas around that idea. We talked about liberated luxury, which was all about a kind of boundaryless mindset that we see emerging from consumers, that's about fluidity, a certain element of freedom and cultural fluency. We then went on to talk about what we called immaterial affluence, that consumers are often foregoing those traditional markers of wealth, the gold taps, for example, and embracing increasingly more inconspicuous forms of luxury. And then thirdly, we really focused on this idea of conscious well-being and how there continues to be a consumer concern around the desire for spaces that facilitate individual and collective well-being, that we have this so much more holistic understanding of mind, body, and spirit. And I think all of this ties into the demand that we see for space and how we learn to value it more, and we start to give it more meaning and purpose. And I think this is really, really clear in the bathroom, because for me, it's the one space within a home that becomes super precious. It's a private space. It's for cleansing, but it's also, I think, for more holistic concepts of wellness, like renewal or ritual and reflection. And those are going to be incredibly important attitudes, behaviors, and activities in the decade to come.
As founder of the Future Laboratory, you've done a lot of research on changing attitudes and trends. So how do you see that the way we live and consume will actually be affected by that?
Well, I think we've really clearly already begun to see, and if anything, COVID has accelerated this trend, the growth of what's been called the transformation economy. So earlier I talked about the transformative 20s, this decade we're in, and we're seeing that go hand in hand with this notion of an economy that is spurred on by a consumer that is really searching out for the businesses, the brands, the products, the goods, the services, the organizations that are proactively supporting them and helping them on their journey to become healthier, wealthier, and happier as people. And I think we really are beginning to see the continued growth of a consumer who is thinking so much more carefully about what they want from life, and therefore what they want from the brands that they buy into, and whether that's a functional need, an essential need, sometimes luxurious or even peripheral. We're beginning to see that growth of a really demanding consumer with higher levels of taste, sophistication, and discernment. And as a result, we've got this whole new value set emerging from our consumers. And I think these are hugely important. And we're beginning to see, I think, these desires working their way through our requirement for the spaces that we live in, whether that's our own home, whether it's an apartment, whether we're living in an apartment block, or a condominium. And in fact, I think it's really important that increasingly we're beginning to see how shared living spaces are going to need to facilitate this shift in attitude, I think, over the next decade.
So what do you think, what services will be actually essential in such condos? And what, putting differently, what would people expect them to be like?
Well, I'll come back to the life-work balance in a minute, but we're already seeing the requirement for the condominium buildings to have a much better air control or air quality system incorporated into the building. So whether it's not just about air conditioning, it really is about air purifying and air quality, and whether that's achieved through the introduction of certain types of plants, but is also using technology. That's definitely something that we've seen on our radar and increasingly being incorporated into many condominiums and upscale luxury apartment blocks. Of course, the idea that we move away from just the facility that might be a gym towards the notion of a wellness center, where actually it might be about the space for the Pilates studio or for the yoga studio. And interestingly, of course, once upon a time, we would have put the gym in the basement because we thought it could just be in a dark room and we didn't want to see, we didn't need windows. Increasingly, of course, we're going to have to move that maybe to the top of the building where we get great panoramic views, so that we actually get that sense of engaging with the city for a moment of reflection while we're exercising. So it's no longer about that kind of idea of the 20-minute of running on a machine. It's actually about the relaxation and the exercise and engaging with the view. But without a doubt, I think the biggest shift that we're going to see, in addition to the notion of the wellness hub, is the need for space within shared buildings.
Chris, that was so much input. Perhaps I would like to ask you a final more personal question. Have you thought about limiting your personal space lately?
Well, in some respect, my ability to use space has been limited by the coronavirus pandemic, and I've not really limited my personal space, but I have limited my personal spend. And I went through an exercise a couple of years back where for 1 year, I decided that I would not spend any of my income on what you could classify as discretionary product or discretionary spending. So no clothes, no designed objects for the house that weren't functional. I was only allowed to buy things that I really, really needed and things that I would either be eating or drinking. And I found it a really engaging exercise for a year where I had to go back and rethink my wardrobe and look through it rather than just reaching for the iPad to search for something new online or to visit a store. And also to maybe reassign objects within the house and give them a new space and a new sense of purpose by reevaluating where they were. And for me, that was a really interesting and very salutary experience.
Well, thank you, Chris. It was really great having you.
Oh, thank you. It was an absolute pleasure and really good to see you again.
You actually also delivered the perfect base for Jay and Cédric, who will speak to us right after a short video about his very special attitude towards objects and reduction. He's also passionate about reducing the list of items he owns. So stay tuned. Thank you. Hi, Cédric. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Cédric, you're kind of becoming a role model. So I think everybody's interested in, could you please share your story of your travels and how did it all start?
Yeah, sure. So travel for me was a natural consequence of a passion that I have. And I was lucky to discover that passion early in my life. In my teenage years, I started my first company. And I first went through that process of what it takes to go from just an idea to having a team, having first customers, and having first sales. And I was so fascinated by the challenges that I encountered and how much fun it was solving them, that I decided to do that over and over and over again. And so I've been an entrepreneur the last 20 years in Europe, in Asia, and in the US, building a number of companies. And more recently, I've also started to invest in early stage entrepreneurs. And along the way, I've realized that in order to be true to that passion and to learn a lot about what it takes to go from 0 to 1, I need to be free. I need to be free from living just in one place, because it's unpredictable where the next big thing, the next company that I really want to sink my teeth into is going to come into existence. And so at the beginning, I moved from Switzerland, where I grew up, to the US, where I started another company. And then pretty soon after, I realized that I don't want to just be able to move from one place to another, but I just want to live everywhere, and I want to be able to spend my time wherever I felt I could learn the most or contribute the most value. And the natural consequence of that was that I realized I have to get rid of things. I don't want to be dragged down by the stuff that I own and the items that I possess. And just gradually, I started reducing the amount of things I owned. At the beginning, I traveled with a backpack and 2 checked bags of luggage. And then pretty soon after, I realized that it all came down to just one backpack, 64 things, everything's black. And that's how my personal possessions looked for the last roughly 15 years now.
But wasn't it super hard to let these things go? I mean, also emotional things, and wasn't that hard for you?
Yeah, I think because my goal was never to own less, my goal was always to just be more free and be able to move more freely and be liberated from things. It was a very natural process for me. It never felt like I have to get rid of things because I want to be a minimalist or I want to own less. Of course, there's been elements and items that I had to think about a bit more. For example, certain tokens or symbols from my childhood. But what I've decided is I would just scan them or take a picture of them before I give them away. And that way I now always have them on my phone. I always have them with me. Whereas before, when I still owned them as a physical token, they would be in one place, but most of the year I was traveling and I wouldn't have access to them anyway. So once I had realized that for me, it's just seeing the object, and that's what brings back the good memories and what makes me feel alive and aware of where I came from. Once it became clear that I can solve that through pictures, it became very easy to also give those things away.
So there is this saying, home is where the heart is. Cédric, in your case, it's rather where your suitcase is, right?
After starting to travel and having been on the road for 5-6 years, of course, that question came up, and friends and family asked me, where do you feel at home? Where is home for you? And I realized that for me, home had taken a new notion. It wasn't where I would sleep every night, or it wasn't a specific culture, but for me, it all comes down to being able to spend time with people that I like and love. My friends and my family and the people I get to work with that inspire me.
As you do travel so many days and you spend a lot of days in hotels, I guess, what would you say is the most important thing for you in a hotel room compared to your own home?
Essentially, there's 3 things that are important to me when it comes to choosing hotels. And the first 2 are pretty straightforward, I think, and most people would agree with. Number 1 is good electricity and Wi-Fi so that I can be productive and connect with everyone. Second, a good bed and a good bathroom so I can get my cold showers and I can get some rest. I can get a good night's sleep, especially when I'm jet lagged. And then the third one is a bit more particular, probably. I really like, when I do deep work, I really like to keep a hairdryer running next to me. So I even have one here on my work desk. And when I'm coding, when I'm writing longer text, when I'm answering emails, very often I will keep the hairdryer run. It gives me this sense of being centered, focused, calm, zen. And so what I sometimes would do is, if I know I'm going to stay at a hotel for a few days at a time, I would give them a quick call or send them an email and ask if they have hairdryers that you can detach and plug in the bedroom area instead of those that you just have in the bathroom, because then even though I have done this in the past, I've actually sat on the floor of the bathroom and got some work done with the hairdryer running. But obviously, I prefer to just bring the hairdryer to the bedroom and sit on a table and get some work done there.
Obviously, the new work on the floor of the bathroom, that's also interesting. So coming back to the topic of minimalism, I mean, so many actually preach that, but very few live up to this. Who can you think of a kindred spirit?
I don't really like the term minimalism as much as essentialism, and I'll tell you why. Minimalism for me sounds like less is better. So the person that only owns 50 items is better than the person that owns 100 items. And that's not really what I subscribe to. For me, it's not about getting to zero. For me, it's about very consciously differentiating between what is really important and what do I want to keep in my life, what is giving me more value than it takes from me, versus everything that's clutter, everything that I kind of carry and I maintain and I keep in my life, even though it doesn't bring me any joy. And it's easy to apply that to things. It's very visual. You can see how much stuff you own. You can go through your wardrobe and take the stuff out that you're not going to wear anymore. But I think it's even more important to apply the same philosophy to other fields in life or other areas in life. And in a sense, I think being an entrepreneur is the truest form of that, because especially in the first few years of a startup's lifetime, you will always deal with constricted resources. So you're never going to have money to do everything. You're never going to have the people to do everything. So you need to be very focused and clear on what is important and what opportunities are just distracting. And so in that sense, I would say entrepreneurs are very clear-headed minimalists and essentialists for me, even if it doesn't mean for most of them that they give up on owning most of their clothing and most of their gadgets. The way they think about life is very much the ideology of a minimalist or essentialist to me.
And perhaps one final, more personal question. What does luxury mean to you?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's twofold. On one hand, it is being able now to choose products that are long-lasting and high quality. So, for example, when I think about which t-shirt am I going to own, I make a point to choose one that is ecologically fine, doing something good for the world, and also it allows me to keep it for, sometimes I can keep the same t-shirt for up to a year, wear it almost every day. And that's something that feels good to me. That's a luxury that I can now afford, that also allows me to not think about my things and what do I get next too often, what do I need to exchange. And then the second thing that's a big component for me when it comes to luxury is freedom. Freedom to live where I want to live, with who I want to live, spend my time with who I want to spend it with, and work on what I want to work on. And that second portion definitely is extremely important for me. I'm very driven by having the freedom to work on what I want to work on with who I want to work with. And I also make it a point to invest in startups or support movements that I hope will give that freedom to more people in this world.
Well, so I think to sum that up on our side, we can actually see that compact and luxury very well can go together, whereas the luxury we know from the past was, well, having bigger things and, spend and earn things. So, and also has a kind of a dimension of responsible luxury, that luxury in the past was, well, because I say so and because I want, and I don't care about the waste and things and the footprint that this is producing. So there's a new perception and idea of luxury, which we find as AXOR very interesting to explore. So thank you so much for sharing your story and making the time. Safe travels tomorrow to Thailand, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you, Cédric.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Hi, Jay. Good to have you. How are you doing?
I'm good, actually. Yeah, I'm pleased to say we have sunshine in London today after 2 weeks of solid rain. So, yeah, water is really not a problem in London at the moment.
It's a good point. And I see you actually in your studio, so in the heart of London, which must be super crowded, and considering the people that you have in your office. So how about that?
Well, yeah, we're in the studio, back in studio. Actually, we've been back in the studio since February, but it's the environment around here has been incredibly quiet, of course, for all the reasons we know. But London now feels busier than it has ever been, and yeah, the studio itself is also really busy, and it's quite interesting, being surrounded by all these people again and finding where everyone's going to work and go and fit and eat and work and collaborate, and it's busy. It's exciting to have the energy of people around us.
That's good to know. So, if I may ask, where do you personally find your precious space? Like, in which environment do you feel most comfortable?
That's a really interesting question, and of course, it's something that changes a lot. I love being in the countryside, for example. I like being out at the seaside, or in the wild, where you're completely free to think and take time, uninterrupted time, to enjoy the world around you. I would say that in the kind of domestic environment, I am probably happiest in the bath, if I'm honest.
Oh, and it's rather the shower or the bathtub?
For me, it's a bath. And in our family, the bath is the sanctuary. And you always know if one of the kids is tired or fed up, or needs to recuperate, because they say, because they disappear into the bath for an hour and a half. And it seems to me that our family is semi-aquatic, and we need to, we find ourselves and our souls in the bathtub.
And speaking of, you're a designer, so speaking about the design process, how do you actually know an idea is the one?
Our design process is, I think, quite uncommon. Whenever we start a project, we have some criteria. I mean, it's not something that we write down. It's not something like a manifesto, but we always think that if at the end of a project, you can't stand and do a lecture about it, or talk to people about it, or have 10 minutes of information to give, then the project itself hasn't justified its existence. And I think we're very conscious that in a world where we have enough of everything, for us to create something new must bring some benefit to people. It must bring a new interaction. It must bring a new idea. And so, to answer your question, we know when we start out on a project that if we have the idea that gets everybody excited, it's the right idea. And if it's an idea that is interesting without looking at the visual, so in other words, if the story itself is interesting before you look at something, then it's a project that's worth doing.
But you have designed so many items over the last 2 decades. So do you also use all the products you design as a designer, or just to make sure you have AXOR in your bathroom?
No, we do. We actually do. I think it's probably one of the most nervous parts of the process, because of course, along the way, when we're designing something, there's always an opportunity to try a prototype. So very often we've had prototypes. I've had prototypes in my house. You try things out, you discover things over time that could be done slightly better, or that you could improve, or things that perhaps you haven't really thought about in the sketchbook. But when you live with something for a while, even to test it before it goes into full manufacture, you really understand the thing. And as a consequence of that, you end up, I guess you kind of form a relationship with the object, if I can say that. You kind of fall in love with it. And so when the object finally comes out, or the thing or is produced, I very, very often buy it, or have one or some of them in the house to really interrogate further, and also to share with the family, I guess. We love the stuff. And so we want to have it as part of our lives. Not all of it, because there's quite a lot, I suppose. Now it's getting busier and busier. The house is just completely full of prototypes and things. But yeah, to answer your question directly, we really do have a lot of our stuff in our lives.
So it's also, I guess, about the interaction with the user. You find, like, if you interact yourself with the product, you discover things you wouldn't discover if you just would design them and then don't use them.
Yeah, I mean, you know what it's like when we've been working on the AXOR projects, for example. We've had prototypes to test at home because the testing is so rigorous. with AXOR in the way that we work together, that, we also take part in the testing, and it's really nice to be able to have different shower heads, to try different water patterns, to try different interactions, to be sure that when we all commit to making that thing, when we start casting metal for production, we want to be sure that it's that we haven't missed anything at all out. So yeah, we do it, we live with it, we test it, we use it, we problem solve it, we think about how we can do something else, for example, in the collection, how you can take the interaction from AXOR 1 shower controller and what we learned from that, and how we can bring that to, into the other parts of the collection, bring the benefit of our learning into other parts of the collection.
So speaking about this AXOR 1 collection, it was a quite long process. So what actually convinced you to pursue this idea?
Well, originally with that, AXOR 1 has been a really long project, and actually our relationship with AXOR has been, about 10 years, in fact, of learning and of us actually understanding the world that you guys operate in. It took a long time. I mean, we all thought it would be easy, but how wrong we were. It was incredibly difficult. And AXOR 1, the shower control project, so the first thing that we did together was came from the idea of being more precise in the way that we control water, partly to conserve water, but also because it's a more pleasurable experience to make things simple. We always felt that the shower experience was overcomplicated, and that that there were too many options, that it was confusing for people, that you never really felt that you got things right, especially if you were in a shower, for example, in a hotel, if you were traveling and it's early in the morning in a different time zone, and really you don't have the dictionary to translate that shower in the time that you have to get ready for a meeting. And so some of those learnings made us, or drove us, to think about how to simplify the interaction in the shower. The learnings that we took from that, which were, let's make a binary controller, like an on-off object, like a pen, like a ballpoint pen, something that wasn't electric, something that was mechanical, but something that gave you complete precision and control. Once we learned how to do that, we felt that the next logical step was to take that language and that approach and apply it to the taps, the faucets, and the other elements, other elements. That way of thinking could become universal for us with you in the bathroom.
So talk about a function, that's also the way how traditionally and usually bathrooms are designed. But what we are also interested is in how we actually create deeper dimension to, apart from pure function. How can we create this, and how can you as a designer contribute to this context?
Because we bring, I hate to say it, but the way that we approach it, we bring an intelligence to the interaction. It's intelligence first, and then it's form. It's really vital to us that everything we do is interrogated and smart and clever. And I think that a lot of the things in life, especially in architecture and spatial arrangements, they need to be, I feel that sometimes they need to be not necessarily the lead player, not necessarily the star in the film, but more the background, the beautiful scenery of the film, not something that shouts out as a design or as an overstyled element. This is something that's about purity, that's calm, that then the user or the customer can feel free to add other elements in that environment without it clashing, without it being such a strong statement that it doesn't sit alongside other people's objects. We like the idea, I think, that today people live in a really multifaceted place, that there isn't a uniformity of environment, and that things are eclectic. And I know eclectic is an overused word, but I think it's important to encourage the collection of things, because those objects that we collect and the objects that we find and that we live with are the things which identify us and ourselves, and they're the things that give you memory and remind you of a place or an experience. And I think therefore our job as designers is to create new objects which can coexist with historical objects or mementos or objects of interest or memory to people, or family objects, family heirlooms.
And then it's also when the bathroom becomes more personal rather than only being a functional place as it's originally planned.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think today the majority of people don't want to live in a magazine interior that is just one dictated environment that everyone has to adapt. I mean, today I think people more increasingly feel freer to be individual and to make their own choices with confidence. And I think those spaces also, if you apply that approach, they can flex and change over time. And you can change the interior, the elements and colors and tiles and things without drastically changing everything. So I think designing something which is timeless is essential. It's essential for the world that we live in, because we need to design things which last a lifetime now and which never let you down and which are beautiful. But more than anything, they need to be able to coexist with other things which change. Life changes. You have children, they're babies. That's a very different thing from having the children when they're teenagers. And I think it's our job to think about that for everybody in the way that we apply it to our own lives.
Very true. Perhaps to sum it up, a personal question, was there perhaps something unconventional? You mentioned also like how bathrooms are changing and getting personal. Was there something that you did to your own bathroom to make it more homey?
Our bathroom is a funny kind of mixture of things. And I guess a little bit, as I was saying before, for a long time, I used to live near the Portobello Road in London. And quite a few of the things from our house have come from Portobello Market. And actually in our bathroom, we've got an old, must be an 18th or 19th century washstand, which has a marble top and mahogany legs. And there's nothing modern about it at all, but it sits there and it's just this really beautiful surface that collects things, certain things that the kids use, or perfume, jewelry, little things and odds and sods, and as well as that in the bathroom, we have, our bath is a freestanding bath. It sits in the middle of the room, which is how you can get the view. And as well as that, we have paintings on the wall rather than tiles everywhere. So it feels much more like a living space than a bathroom, actually.
So it should be spaces that we feel comfortable in and connect and have them the way we want them. Perhaps it's the space where we can actually be ourselves only with, it's a very intimate space, and perhaps with a family and the partner, but it's compared to the kitchen, other rooms of the house, it's where you wouldn't invite a stranger. So you're either on your own or with your beloved one. So.
But it's true, but it's also it's the only space in the house that you can legitimately lock yourself in.
That's also true.
I mean, it's not only is it a sanctuary, but it's also a safe room, isn't it?
It is the only safe room to be in your own.
To just enjoy the space. And it's also, I think the great thing about a bath and a shower is it's another place where you don't take your phone, where you can just challenge yourself to think about your thoughts, not to reply to an email, not to, do anything, social media. It's a place for contemplation and reflection. And it's either to wake you up or make you feel sleepy or
reflect the day. Exactly.
It's funny, actually, when I was a child, I always used to I remember thinking when as a child in the bath, I always felt that it was the place where I would have the eureka moment, because as a child, I was told the story of Archimedes, is it? The eureka story. Anyway, as a child, I was told the story, of the eureka moment. And every bath I had after I was 5, I was always convinced that I would have the eureka moment, which would change my life in bath. And I can't say whether that happened. It hasn't happened yet. I'm still waiting.
Well, it's yet to come. Next bathroom.
Yeah, I'll let you know. Well, you'll be the first to know, because probably it'll be related to tax.
Jay, it was lovely having you. Thank you so much for making the time. And I would love to have a Eureka moment myself in my next bathroom. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. See you again soon, Anke.
We're now at the end of our first session. Thank you for all this wonderful insight and views into tomorrow's essentials. You actually left us with quite a lot to think about, and not just in terms of our personal spaces like our bathrooms. The world is actually really changing. We will live more intensely and experience the world very differently from now on. We are on our way to something new, something more sophisticated. Personally, I do have an idea of what the next step in bathroom design will be. More refined and more to the point than ever before. If you're interested in reading more about this topic, our white paper is available for downloading on our website. And if you enjoyed today's session, which I hope you did, well, stay tuned for the next one. On April 20th, we'll talk about responsibility. For the next session, we'll again invite speakers from very different fields of expertise to share their thoughts with us. In this session, you will then also have the possibility to ask direct questions to our internal experts. Sign up for our newsletter for more information and the final invite. Thank you, goodbye, and see you soon.